Hello, this video is going to be about solving equations with fractions. We're going to review an old method to doing it and then learning a new method that will help us with Algebra 2 skills. In this first example, I am going to solve it using two different methods. The first method I am going to use will simply be to combine like terms on the left-hand side by taking negative 5/3 x and subtracting the 2x from it, simplifying that, and then going through pretty much our basic inverse operations to solve. First, you'll notice that instead of having a minus 2x in here, I rewrote that as a minus 6/3 because that is equal to 2, and it gives me my common denominators that I need in order to combine these two fractions together. So I have not done any inverse operations yet. I simply combined these two fractions together to get negative 11/3. Now I will undo this multiplication that's happening by dividing both sides by the negative 11/3, or technically multiplying both sides by the reciprocal. So it's still negative, but it just gets flipped. And when we do that, on the left side, everything simplifies out to be 1, which is the reason why we do it. And on the right-hand side, the 11 simplify, the 3's and the 9 simplifies down to 3, so it looks like we end up with a positive 1/3 as our x value. Now, before I go into the second method here, just a quick review. We had to change the minus 2 into a common denominator with the 5/3, so we had to rewrite that. Then we were multiplying with fractions, adding and subtracting with fractions, and then technically dividing, multiplying with fractions. And so we had a lot of fraction work. And it seems unavoidable until actually in our very first step, what we're going to do in the second method is to get rid of that fraction altogether. So in order to get rid of the fraction altogether, we need to identify the least common denominator between all of the fractions involved. So if I look at my fractions here at 5/3 and then 11/9, okay, my least common denominator would be 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything, like the whole expression is going to be multiplied by 9. It's going to look a little complicated at first, but you'll see, hopefully, once we start to do it more often, that it's very convenient in getting rid of the fractions right away, because right now at this step everything will simplify out of the denominator. So these are both divisible by 3, so that turns into 3, so I have a negative 15 from the 3 times negative 5. This turns into a minus 18x, and then these 9's simplify out, and all I'm left with is a negative 11. So from here, oops, I lost my x in there. From here, I can actually subtract negative 15 minus 18 to get negative 33x equals negative 11. And then I'm just dividing both sides by negative 33, which simplifies to a positive 1/3. So we should get the exact same answer because it is the exact same problem. It's just a different way to do it. And again, this might look a little complicated, but this is going to be very helpful in the next unit for Algebra 2. So the goal, again, is to get rid of the fraction from the very beginning by multiplying everything by the least common denominator. Let's do a few more. In this example, we have 8/3 x minus 9/4 x equals negative 5/12. So the goal will be to use the least common denominator, which in this case, between 3, 4, and 12 is going to be 12. We're going to multiply everything by 12, and then that should eliminate our fractions as we go through. Now I'm going to show every single little tiny step here, and then hopefully by the end of these couple examples we won't have to do that anymore. Okay, so I multiplied every term by 12/1 just to show it as fractions, and then I'm going to go through and take care of all of my simplifying. Now for this particular example, I'm not even going to finish solving it because this step here is really the point of this video. So I'm multiplying everything by 12 by that least common denominator, and the whole point of doing that is because of all of this green simplification that can take place to eliminate all of the fractions. I know it may not seem that simple right now, but again, it's a skill we must use and understand in order to do some things with more complicated expressions in Algebra 2. for this example, negative 7 halves x minus 5 halves plus 2x equals negative 17 fifths. The least common denominator between the fractions is 10. And the reason why I chose this particular example is because it's a mixture of some non-fractions and then some fractions that don't have a variable. But the whole point, and the only way that this works, is that everything, whether it's a fraction originally or not, whether there's a variable on it or not, everything must get multiplied by that least common denominator in order for it all to work out. Notice that in this section here where the 10 was simply being multiplied by the 2x, I did not write it as 10 over 1 because there was no fraction here. I only wrote it as 10 over 1 in the multiplication that happens to be involving fractions so that you can see the simplifying that's going to be happening next. So just make sure you're keeping track of all of your positives and negatives everywhere. And it looks like actually I lost the negative right there, so let me include that in here and then in that answer there. So again, I'm not going to go through and actually solve this one, but this is the lesson here where we are actually taking that least common denominator and multiplying it by everything to get rid of those fractions from the very beginning before doing any inverse operations. Thanks for watching.